So I got that Synology NAS that's 12 bays, and I found it on eBay. It's a 2014 model. I got a good deal on it. I'm really excited about it. I would like to know from you guys what I need to do to get smooth playback for my 8K time lapses. It plays back at about a frame per second. Sometimes I can get upwards of 8 or 9 frames a second, but most of the time it's like 1 frame a second or 1 frame every 2 seconds. It's very kludgy. There's some sort of bottleneck happening. I want 24 frames a second of 8K TIFF files. These TIFF files are 137 megabytes a piece. That's the goal. I put 5 hard drives in it so far in SHR, which is RAID 5. I'm getting about 600 to 700 megabytes per second read, and then about 400 megabytes per second write. The write is fine. I don't have any SD cards from cameras that can read faster than that in order to write to the NAS. So the 400 megabytes per second is plenty for me, and you can tell me if this is my bottleneck, but it's the random reads and writes are 40 to 50 megabytes per second for those 5 14 terabyte Western Digital CMR drives. It gives me absolutely no problems with 4K footage, 422 10-bit footage, even 60 frames a second from the A7S III. I'm not having any trouble editing that from the NAS. 40 to 50 megabytes per second is plenty. If I'm using the NAS for other things that is hitting the random reads and writes really hard, if I'm torrenting a movie off of some torrent website that has a lot of small little reads and writes, that's going to be a problem. But I don't do that, so I don't really worry about that so much. What I'm having trouble with is when I'm trying to do a time lapse that's a 6K, 8K time lapse of TIFF files, TIFF files that are 130 megabytes per file, and I want to put 24 of them in a second, and I want 10-second time lapse of that. That is where I'm running into trouble with this particular NAS. Each drive is 180 to 200 sequential reads and writes, but their randoms are much lower. What I was thinking is I need to buy more hard drives, but then I would have to rebuild the array, and then if I do that, then I need to back up my array, which is I should do anyway, which means I need to buy other hard drives to move the footage onto over here to back it up, and then rebuild the array over there, and I really want to rebuild this array into SHR2, which would be RAID 6, which would have 2 drives of redundancy. So I'm thinking I need to buy probably 5 14 terabyte hard drives to put into that one, which would bring me up to 10 drives for over there. But I have that old Synology NAS that I told you guys about before, which is a 4 bay. So I thought about getting 4 drives from server part deals, 20 terabyte Western Digital CMR drives for about $350, which is way too expensive. Even though it's a gigabit Ethernet port on that NAS, I don't care about the speed, it's just a backup, which it has 4 20 terabyte drives, 30 terabytes of footage, and then I put more 14 terabyte drives into that array. But let me tell you about the chain between the Synology NAS and my workstation. You tell me where my bottleneck is, because I'm getting 1 frame every couple of seconds. That NAS is a Synology rs3614rpxs. That's the model number. It's 12 bays. I can't remember the socket for the CPU. I could probably increase my performance by upgrading the CPU, but I don't know if that motherboard is compatible or can supply enough power to like the 85 watt 4-core Intel CPU for that socket. I think it's limited to 45 watts in that socket on that motherboard. They have some server CPUs from Intel that I can get from eBay for like $30, but I would like to have the GPU, the internal GPU. So I currently have 4-core internal GPU, CPU in there. So I don't know if upgrading the CPU in the NAS is going to help increase my performance by add in GPU in my NAS. Maybe performance in Plex, probably not in the time lapse. That's not going to happen. The GPU thing would be silly. In the notes, it says that it is limited to 32 gigabytes of ECC RAM. DDR3 ECC RAM runs really cheap on eBay right now, and I could get 128 gigabytes of it, but I don't want to buy $80 worth of RAM to not use if it's not going to work in that system. Have any of you had that model and upgraded it to more than 32 gigabytes of RAM? Because right now I have 32 gigabytes of RAM. I don't know if I can upgrade that, but that might actually increase my random reads and writes significantly because Synology uses the RAM as a cache. Speaking of cache, I could get a 8-lane PCIe add-in card that's an adapter to M.2, and I could put a couple M.2 SSDs on that, put it in there, and then have those as an SSD cache, which would bring up my random reads and writes as well. SSD caching is going to pick files that are used over and over again on a daily basis, and when I'm working on a project, I work on it for that day, maybe another day, and then I'm finished with the project, so it's not going to get into the cache necessarily. SSD caching might not help as much as more hard drives. Like, the problem with that is I would need a terabyte or 2 or 4 terabytes of SSD, which is going to take up more of my RAM, which is going to take away from the RAM cache, which is actually faster than the SSD cache. So I'm not sure if that's worth it. Then we talk about the network interface. I could upgrade the network card in there, but I don't think that's going to do anything at 600 to 700 megabytes per second. Network card should have some headroom still left. Plus, I'm more concerned about the random, which is down by 40 to 50 megabytes per second. So there's plenty of headroom for that network card. So I don't think that's going to do anything. 10 gigabits per second network interface on the Synology NAS goes into my UDM Pro from Ubiquiti, which advertises 3.6 gigabits per second, which could be a bottleneck. But I have achieved 700 megabytes per second, which would be around 7 gigabits per second. So I'm achieving double of what the UDM Pro is rated for through the SFP Plus connections. I don't know if that's my bottleneck. I will have a video of a Ubiquiti switch I snagged on eBay that they don't even make anymore. It's a US16XG, and it looks like a really cool switch, so I'll make a video about that. Should have spent the money on hard drives, but I spent it on that instead, so that was a dumb purchase, but that'll be cool. Then I have my workstation plugged in, and let's talk about the network card in the workstation first, because I think that's my bottleneck in my workstation. It's a Mellanox or NVIDIA NIC that is a ConnectX-3, and I've seen a lot of people online complain about these cards, saying they have issues with them, and I don't know how to set things in the BIOS in order to tune them, but I heard that if you tune them, you can get more performance out of them. But I had trouble with this card, and so I bought another ConnectX-3 card off of eBay for cheap. I don't know if I'm just having less trouble with that one, or if I've just kind of worked the kinks out of my network. I haven't plugged this one back in. I was having some glitchiness going on with the by 4 PCI lane that I had my 10 gigabit per second NIC in. So I moved it up to the second PCIe slot. The first slot gets shrunk down to a by 8 lane if you occupy the second slot. So am I choking off my GPU by having that network card in there? The GPU is an RTX 3090, 24 gigabytes of VRAM, Asus TUF. Is that GPU getting throttled by not having enough bandwidth? As far as the CPU in this system goes, it's a 9700K, which is an 8-core, 4.9 gigahertz CPU. I could buy a 9900K off of eBay for about $250. Could try overclocking it. The RAM in my workstation, 64 gigabytes of 2666 megahertz CL18 RAM, which is really slow RAM. I spent $500 on that kit of RAM, and now you can get 3200 megahertz CL12 RAM for like $80. So yeah. Yeah. DDR4. I could probably increase my performance by upgrading my RAM, by moving my network add-in card to the third slot instead of the second slot. But like I said, connectivity issues, which are annoying. I could probably increase my performance by upgrading my CPU or overclocking my CPU. But upgrading the hard drives, or the number of hard drives, I think that's my bottleneck. If I did an SSD cache, that's going to increase random reads. So I could do that. But I think the right thing for my particular workflow, if I doubled my hard drives, I'd be at 80 to 100 megabytes per second random read and write. Server part deals is going to be my place to buy hard drives. I'm thinking that's probably the way to go. Anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you think my bottleneck is, and I will upgrade that first. Maybe I'll do a community post where you guys can vote on what to upgrade, although I only get 4 options with that. So I will be looking in your comments for what people think the top 4 options should be, and then I'll make a community post. Oh, hey, if you want to support the channel, I applied for Amazon Associates and they rejected my application, and then here recently, a few months later, I reapplied for Amazon Associates and they accepted my application. So now if you go in the link in the description down yonder, you can actually click that link, browse on Amazon, buy something on Amazon, and I'll get a commission at no extra cost to you, and it will support the channel so that I can do these crazy upgrades to my network and tell you about them and vlog about it. If that's something you would like to do, YouTube does not monetize this channel because I'm violent and abusive behavior, which I don't get, but maybe I'm just mean in the comments. I don't know. My replies in the comments are mean. I don't know. So I can't monetize the YouTube channel, and Patreon seems weird because I'm asking you guys for advice. It's not like I'm giving you guys advice, so it feels weird to have Patreons since I'm not giving you guys any value. If you want to support the channel, my silly shenanigans, then Amazon Associates link down yonder. Appreciate you guys. Out.